And now, please welcome Executive Chairman of the Board at Air Lease Corporation, Stephen Udvar-Házy, in discussion with founder and editor of the Airline Observer, Brian Summers.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Steve. You know, I never get nervous for these sessions because I've been doing it for so long, but you are aviation royalty, and so this is a very big deal for me. Really enjoyed your session on how I built this. Did everybody listen to that? It's a podcast. You should. Learned a lot about your
Thank you very much.
Growing up. All right, so let's start with the tough questions here. I want to know, you had told Bloomberg, I think, earlier this year that airlines are like kids in a candy store. And by that, you meant they see all these shiny new airplanes and they have to make these orders of hundreds of airplanes. Are we in an aircraft purchasing, leasing bubble right now?
In some ways, yes. The big difference is kids in a candy store usually have parents that can afford the candy. The airline children don't necessarily have big daddies. Some do and some don't.
So how does this resolve itself?
Look, if you look at the pattern of airlines since World War II, what happens is you have a period of losses, very low traffic growth. Airlines are struggling financially. They are canceling orders. They're deferring. They're thinking about survival, and they have a very short-term view in their strategic planning. Then you have a period after the pandemic where things are looking good. There's recovery, more traffic, yields are up. Everything looks very optimistic, and they think that will continue forever. So they all converge on Boeing and Airbus and Embraer and order as many planes as they can, not only to grow the company, but also to replace a lot of older planes. And they generally, their eyes are bigger than their stomachs, so they order more than they can really absorb financially, strategically, and also in terms of infrastructure. And then when the next slowdown occurs, then they wake up in the morning and say, oh shit, I've got 300 airplanes on order, but I can only reuse 120. So they go back to Boeing and Airbus, very humble, saying, can we defer a 28 position to 2032? And this cycle just goes on and on and on. And that's why this year we have not ordered hundreds of airplanes. Usually people say, okay, Steve, at these air shows, Paris, Farnborough, you place these big orders. Well, we're not placing big orders because I believe a certain percentage of these big mega orders will kind of flake out or evaporate.
How much of this is just FOMO or fear of missing out, that if you don't get on the books for 2029 now, it's going to be 2027 and you are not going to be able to get airplanes. Right. So you're just keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah,
Boeing and Airbus do a good job of that. But if a first-class customer goes in and says, look, I need some planes in 28, 29, 30, give us a few positions, they'll figure out a way. So buying airplanes because you're panicking, you can't get enough aircraft, is not a good way to run an airline. And usually airlines don't go bust by having too few airplanes. They usually go bust for having too many that they can't service properly financially and operationally.
So all these airplanes that airlines are ordering up into the 2030s, they're all essentially based on older technologies, right? 737 MAXs,
well, existing
A321s.
Technology.
Yeah. When are we going to see, a new clean sheet aircraft? Is anybody going to build something special and new?
Well, we have an interesting situation because the laws of physics have taken us to this point where the manufacturers have pushed for fuel economy, noise, environmental credibility, and they've kind of pushed the current technology to the limits. So there's not a lot you can improve over and above the current engines and airframes out there. So there's two alternative solutions. One is more of an electric airplane, which is probably going to be workable on smaller short-haul operations, or go hydrogen. The problem with hydrogen, it's very environmentally efficient, but you need a ground support system to actually fuel airplanes, storage and delivery, and then the volume it takes for the liquid is just unbelievably large. So that's going to be a weight and space issue. And maybe a third alternative is a whole new radical design. I'm sure all of you have seen kind of it's almost like a flying wing that's more fuel efficient, but it's probably not kind of user-friendly in terms of configuration. You'd have maybe 20 people sitting across. So it's almost like a ferry boat inside with skylights, because you can't have windows because they've got huge wings. So look, I think we're making a lot of progress, but I don't think between now and the mid-30s, 2030s, we're going to have a new airplane that will obsolete the current fleets.
All right, so how are airlines all over the world going to meet these sustainability targets? This
They won't.
no net new zero emissions by 2050? Wait, you're telling me they won't?
No.
But these people out there, there's going to be a sustainability panel later this afternoon. They're going to say, we're on it.
Look, it's like my kids that went to Stanford, they all think they're going to get straight A's for 4 years. And then they come back Christmas time, Dad, I got a B in one of my courses. So look, I think the industry is going to try very hard to achieve this objective, but it's going to be very difficult. And the other thing is, we're probably looking at somewhere around 35,000 jet aircraft in operation by, say, 2032, 2033. Aircraft that are more than 100 seats. How can you replace that many aircraft when you really only have 2 manufacturers that can barely build 600, 700, 800 aircraft a year? So, okay, even if we have the technology, how do you replace everything which has been, consumed tremendous investment, hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in current technology airplanes that are already delivered or will be delivered? So it's going to be a longer time frame. My guess is 10, 15 years longer. But that's just a Steve Házy personal.
Well, Steve Házy, you
reality.
You have quite a track record, and you have much better access to CEOs than I do.
Yes.
You're having dinner with them, you're seeing them all the time.
Yeah.
They're telling you things that they would never tell me. They know, right? No matter what they're coming out and they're telling the media, they know the truth.
Well, last week I had dinner with Willie Walsh. He used to be the CEO of Aer Lingus, then he became head of IAG, which is British Airways, American. Now he's the head of IATA. And he's one of the people that has proclaimed this objective of 2050. And he understands that the headwinds to get there are very significant, not just in terms of technology and industrial constraints, but also financially. How do you refleet the whole global fleet in an economical manner, even if we have some technologies available?
So another buzz phrase is sustainable aviation fuel and SAF. And we had a Skift conference last month, spoke to David Neilman on stage about this very topic, and he did not hold back. He thinks it's all a farce. There isn't enough of it. It's not worth it.
It's
Where
not
are you
a farce,
on SAF?
but it's a supply limitation. For example, I was at the ALTA conference, which is the Association of Latin American Airlines, last week in Cancun. And there's not a single SAF producer right now in Latin America. So, and then how do you get the stuff to the airport? How do you get it so it's economical? Right now, there's such a gap between Jet A kerosene and SAF. A lot of governments will subsidize it, so the taxpayer will actually be funding part of that. But how do you ramp that up to levels that are meaningful? Even 10% is pretty hard to reach.
Thank you. All right, let's talk a little bit about airplanes that actually, well, I was going to say actually will fly, although we have a couple of audience questions in front of us about planes that may or may not fly. We can start with them. The first question is Boom Supersonic viable? What do you think?
Technologically, yes.
Commercially?
Well, I think there's several issues. The cost of getting that aircraft certified is probably far beyond what they had projected. So where's the money going to come from? And then secondly, will you as the consumer, passenger, pay a significant premium to fly on a supersonic aircraft? Because if you don't, they're going to need 130% load factor to break even. So that's the issue. Is there going to be enough funding to get it certified? And then secondly, how will they manage the economics of the airplane? Is it going to be financeable? Who's going to finance an airplane like that? Like the Concorde, does it have a 10-year life? Does it have a 15-year life? It's certainly not a 100,000 flight hour airplane like a 767 or A321. So how do you put a residual value on that kind of an airplane in 10 years or 15 years? So it's financeability, the cost of getting it certified, and can you get a significant premium as a passenger? The other thing is it does not have the range, for example, to go from here to Europe. It can go from the East Coast, like New York, Boston, Washington, Philadelphia, to London, Paris. But it can't do Trans-Pacific nonstop. It would have to stop in Anchorage or go via Hawaii. So operationally, it has some, limitations.
And then you've always been a big Boeing customer.
Yes.
We have an audience question about the 777X, which you have not ordered. Why don't you like the 777X?
It's not that I don't like it, but it's already 5.5 years late. It's over budget, and there's no definitive horizon on when it will be certified. Now Boeing is saying it's 2025. Well, will they guarantee it? No, it's a best efforts. And again, it offers only a very small incremental improvement over the 777-300ER in operating costs, but then the capital cost of the airplane is significantly higher than, say, a 5-year-old 777-300ER. So when you add in the capital cost and then balance that against the operating cost savings, a little bit of a fuel burn advantage, a little more payload, it doesn't really pencil out.
So overall, has Boeing just been too cautious with its new aircraft?
Yes. What's interesting, the last new airplane, all-new airplane clean sheet design was a 787, which, as you all know, was late, significantly above budget, and even today on the airplanes they're delivering, I'm not sure they're making a real profit. So what they keep doing is they keep extending how many airplanes they're going to build and then amortizing the R&D over those number of airplanes. But since then, they have done really no new aircraft. And I think in the large segment of single-aisle aircraft, the A321neo got away from them. They underestimated the impact and capability of the A321neo. And now you have a situation where compared to the MAX 10, the A321 has just run away with market share. It's got more range, it's got more capacity, it can carry belly cargo, containers. And so Boeing has a big gap between the 787-8, their smallest wide body, and the 737 MAX. And that's where Airbus has really come through very strongly. And as you have airport slot restrictions, the larger single-aisle aircraft have become more desirable.
All right, one more aircraft question for you, and then we'll move on.
Just one more?
Just one more about aircraft.
Okay.
More about other things. But the 321, but the XLR. There's
Yes.
some question about whether this is just going to replace the 757 transatlantic, or is this going to be a game changer for mid-length transoceanic flights? Are we going to see tons of new routes, that sort of thing, or is this a niche aircraft?
The answer is both.
Yeah.
It is a game changer in the sense that, I'll give you an example. On the North Atlantic, there's a huge difference between traffic flows, say in July and August and February, okay? So for 4 or 5 months out of the year, it might be profitable to operate a 787-9 or an A350 on a certain city pair. But in the low season, to operate a 190, 200-seat XLR is probably more efficient, more economical. It's also a tool, as Robert said earlier, that you can use it to add frequencies. You can add different market pairs, different city pairs. So it gives the airlines more scheduling flexibility. It can bypass hubs, congested hubs. Like in France, you don't have to go through Paris. Maybe you can fly to Lyon or Bordeaux or Nice and bypass congested hubs and have direct flights from the East Coast. We placed, for example, 15 aircraft with Air Canada, XLRs. We're the launch customer of the XLR. And they determined that for every major city in Canada except Vancouver, they can cover all of Europe with that airplane. From anywhere in Canada except British Columbia, they can go nonstop to their European destinations. So it gives the airlines a lot of flexibility. They can use them transcon. They can use the airplane, on a short leg and then do a long leg. I'll give you an example. We have 8 A321LRs, long-range A321s with Aer Lingus. So they operate the aircraft from Dublin to Boston, Dublin to Washington, Dublin to Hartford. And what they do is the airplane makes a transatlantic flight to Dublin and then does a quick hop over to London, and they've got the lie-flat seats in business class, goes back to Dublin, and then does another transatlantic sector. So instead of a 12-hour flying day, they can actually do a 14-hour flying day. So all their fixed costs are already covered. And they can do a short leg to London or Paris or Amsterdam. So
Great.
These airplanes have a lot of flexibility. You really couldn't do that with a wide-body aircraft.
Thank you. All right, so one of the things that I find interesting about your business is in the leasing business, you're kind of an early warning system,
yes.
right? Because you're going to find out there's softness before we are, because you may have to go get your airplane or people are not making payments. Yeah. The big headline right now is that demand is pretty steady in most places. Any areas of the world where you're seeing weakness and the people in the audience may not know it yet?
Well, I think the weaknesses all boil down to geopolitical risk. For example, El Al, was the last airline flying to Tel Aviv, and now they really cut back. The London insurance market pulled the insurance, so the government had to step in to cover insurance. We have 2 787-9s there. And then the whole surrounding area, Jordan, Lebanon, has had severe effect on air travel. If something happens in the South China Sea, it doesn't have to be a full military confrontation. It could be a partial naval blockade, anything like that. Those are the kind of things that will have an immediate impact. And then it's hard to gauge what the recovery period is. So I think our biggest concerns today are the geopolitical risks and their impact on air travel and people's ability and propensity to travel. Otherwise, we're seeing really strong growth for the next 10 years, at least 5-7% average growth. And it's usually roughly twice GDP. You can track that since World War II, that air traffic kind of doubles every 14, 15 years, and it generally grows about twice GDP growth.
Great. I wanted to ask you some questions about the U.S. market, because that's where you're based, and yes, that's why we are here. Scott Kirby is trying to push a narrative. He did it on the last United Airlines earnings call. He basically said there's 2 airlines in the United States that are making 90% of the pre-tax profit, and that's United and Delta, and everybody else is behind. The ULCCs are in trouble. The world is just about premium carriers now flying long haul. Scott does love his theses. What do you think of this? Are we just in a weird situation?
Well, wouldn't you say that if you were the CEO of United? Look, let's not pretend that we're an airline. Let's look at it from the outside. The LCCs of the world have really stimulated air travel. They brought the affordability of air travel to a much lower level where people can fly. And they've introduced air travel to tens of millions of people that heretofore never flew. So they're kind of the incubators of the industry. So I wouldn't criticize them too much. Okay, the product, service maybe isn't the kind of standard that Scott is talking about, but I think that the LCCs and ULCCs have a big role. I mean, look at Europe. Look at what Ryanair has accomplished, what EasyJet, Wizz Air, Vueling. They've all really significantly outpaced the major network carriers in terms of traffic growth and traffic stimulation. Same thing here. Look at Texas. We had a little intrastate airline in the early 70s that could only fly Dallas, San Antonio, Houston. And now that airline carries more passengers, almost like the way Greyhound bus used to, on US domestic flights. And then look at the guys that have really done a lot of work. The expansion in Florida, airlines like Allegiant, Spirit, Frontier have really brought Florida and Orlando and Fort Lauderdale affordable for a lot of people living in the Midwest or in the northern part of the US. Yes, the network carriers have huge advantages. Their loyalty programs, their networks, their alliances with global airlines, it gives them tremendous advantages, but not all of air travel is the premium traffic. It's a very important part of air travel, and most of our wide bodies are dedicated to that market worldwide. But I think the industry needs different segments of different types of airlines, and they each fill a role, and we serve all of them.
It's a very diplomatic answer.
Yeah, well, in this business, you have to be a diplomat.
Of course. All right.
We're in 85 countries, so I can't be too controversial.
Later today, I'm going to interview Jude Brecker, the
Yes.
CEO of Sun Country, on this very stage. I don't know if he's out there right now, but he has promised me that we can talk a little bit about consolidation in the U.S. space. And he told me on the phone that there are a lot of ULCCs in the United States. We picked up 2 more, Avelo and Breeze, during the pandemic.
And how many will survive?
That is
another
the
day's
question.
discussion.
The first question is how many will survive, and then the second is, do you think that at the low end we need to see some consolidation?
Well, tell Jude I leased Sun Country 727s when he was still in diapers. Look, whenever there's capital, pilots, and airplanes, there's going to be new airlines. Those are the 3 ingredients to make new babies in this industry. And there's a shortage of pilots, but if you join an airline like Breeze, you can become a captain very quickly, maybe in 18 to 24 months. If you join Scott's Airline United or Delta or American, it's going to be, I don't have the exact timing, but my guess is at least 10 to 15 years to become a captain. So for a lot of pilots, a new airline is a faster route to being in command, and that also means higher pay quicker. Look, a lot of these airlines are trying new ways of running the business, new way of appealing to consumers, more digitalized, more serving markets that don't have flights currently. And Avelo and Breeze both have done a lot of bypassing hubs and trying out different market pairs that nobody's ever done before. And what you're seeing is there's probably about a 30 to 35% failure. In other words, they try 20 new routes and maybe 7 of them just don't work. And you see them pull out and try something else. So, it's kind of an experimental situation where you find niches in the market that the big guys don't serve.
But should they consolidate at the low end?
Because of financial considerations, stakeholders, shareholders, they will be pressured to consolidate. But then we have situations like the JetBlue-Spirit merger, which on a university term paper makes a lot of sense. But when you look at integrating 2 airlines with totally different cultures, different aircraft configurations, it becomes very, very problematic. And we found it out when Alaska bought Virgin America, that they had two incompatible fleet structures, and we helped Alaska get out of their A320 fleet and put in new 737 MAXs, but the complexities involved in putting two companies together that are totally different, that come from different pedigrees, is a nightmare.
So is it fair to say that you do not think that the proposed JetBlue-Spirit merger is a good idea?
If I was running those two airlines, I would have taken a different track, but I'm not a shareholder in either one. So
Great.
I'm looking at this from 45,000 feet.
Thank you. All right, we have a few minutes left. I think we have some pictures of you from the good old days. Yeah.
Did our lawyers authorize it?
One of my favorite things about you, Steve, is that you still love airplanes as much as you did when you were a kid, right?
Yeah, and I was stupid enough to start an airline at the age of 22. The only guy that was getting paid were the fueler, the caterer, and the guy that leased the airplane to me.
So I did want to ask you this because I listened to this episode of How I Built This, and you were great, and you talked about the good old days. But if you had to start an airline now, and I know that you never would, but you know a lot more than you did then.
Yes.
What would the model be? Would you go ULCC? Would you go hybrid? Would you go premium? Where do you think the money is to be made?
I would probably go somewhere between a ULCC and an LCC. Some
Really?
kind of
A Breeze.
No.
What would this airline look like?
Well, I would find the most expensive psychiatrist I could find in Beverly Hills to talk me out of starting an airline. That would be a much better investment than putting the money in an airline.
All right. So you've been doing aircraft leasing for a long time, and I know
50 years.
It's much more lucrative. And I have a question. I want to put you on the spot a little
But
bit.
I love the airline business.
All right. I'm a curious guy, but have you
Yeah.
ever gone somewhere, leased an airplane, and you felt guilty? You in the back of your mind, you thought, guys, like, you have no idea what you're doing. You really should not take this airplane.
Have I ever taken advantage of a customer? Intellectually or morally? Or financially? Yeah. We have aircraft at airlines where the only jet they have is our plane. I'll give you an example. Air Vanuatu. Now, most of you probably never heard of Air Vanuatu. It's a little country that's kind of between the coral side of Australia, like Brisbane, and Fiji. It's kind of in between those two. I think it's got about 200,000 people, and we have a 737-800. And every time I go down there, which is like every 2 years, I kind of feel guilty that I'm charging these poor people like $325,000 a month. And I see kids on the street that don't have shoes, and every once in a while they have a cyclone, and we have to send medical supplies. And, so I have empathy for them, but they need our plane. It's the only link they have to Australia and New Zealand. So it's their only lifeline to the outside world. So there's a mixture of feelings there.
I get it.
Another one that you guys will find funny, we did a 737-400 at Solomon Airways. And one time I was doing a Wall Street roadshow, and we had a list of customers on one of these screens, and it said Solomon. And they said, "You lease airplanes to Solomon Brothers?" And again, it's a small country just off the coast of Australia, one jet, and they had a couple of twin otters flying between the islands. So, look, it's a fascinating business. We enjoy it. It's made the world much smaller. This year, there'll be close to 5 billion passengers flying, 5 billion passenger trips on the airline business. And look what it's done to the world in terms of commerce, connectivity, getting people together, mobility. The airline industry has really changed our planet in many ways that is really just amazing. And I'm proud and humbled to be a little part of that.
Great. Let me put you on the spot for one last question, and we'll make your answer short if that's okay.
That looks like an A321.
I know you made a lot of money in this industry. You've been very successful. What's your biggest mistake of an airplane? What airplane did you see? This is can't miss. Let's order them, and it just didn't work.
The biggest mistake is I ordered 10 A380s.
Ooh.
But before I came to my senses, before they were delivered, 5 of them were freighters, to be freighters, and we in UPS and FedEx ordered the A380 freighter. And then one morning I woke up and I said, in a high wind situation when it's icy and cold, how do you load that upper deck? I said, that's not going to work. So we canceled our A380 orders and converted them to A330s and A321s for the same value. And Airbus credited us, but that was my stupidest move. Thank goodness.
Thank you so much, Steve. This has been a fantastic discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.